Get out!
Sir, we don't deal with strays.
Avery didn't move. Fingers whitened around the envelope.
I want the garage on Breckenridge.
Holloway stepped forward, close enough for Avery to smell the cologne.
You? Buy property?
A slow laugh. Avery's jaw clenched.
Dogs don't own houses, boy. Dogs sleep outside.
$1,000. Cash.
Holloway snatched the envelope,
Humiliating.
shook crumpled bills onto the marble desk like dumping trash.
This is 4 years of your life?
He pinched a wrinkled 5 between 2 fingers. He signed the deed standing up, slid it across without looking.
Take your rat hole. Go play. 2 months, you'll crawl back.
Avery picked up the deed, hands steady, eyes locked. What Holloway just threw away for pocket change would keep him up at night for the rest of his life. But that part comes later.
Man, wait. You need to hear how this kid got here. Because this story, it starts with a dead father and a $20 bill. The night before, Avery sat on the front steps of his mother's duplex, counting bills for the 11th time. $987. 13 short. The screen door creaked. Lorraine Green stepped out in hospital scrubs, faded blue flowers, frayed collar. Overnight shift at Detroit Metropolitan. Office cleaning from 7 to noon. 4 hours of sleep a day. That was what she gave herself. Still countin'. I'm short, Mama. She pulled a 20 from her pocket, held it out. No, that's yours. Earl Green would have walked through fire for a boy who builds with his hands. Avery took the bill, his throat locked. He'd stopped crying about his father at 12, not because the pain left, because he learned to carry it without falling. Earl Green, best mechanic on Detroit's east side. Not the computer and code kind, the close your eyes, listen to the idle, name the misfiring cylinder kind. He started teaching Avery at 6, tiny fingers mapping a carburetor from a milk crate. Every machine has a heartbeat, son. You just have to listen. Earl died at 41. Hydraulic lift failure at the shop where he worked nights. The owner had 2 prior citations for faulty equipment. Nothing changed until something did. Avery was 9. After that, the toolbox under the bed, the marbled notebook full of engine sketches, drawings so precise his shop teacher asked if he'd trace them from a textbook. He hadn't. Now 18, fresh out of Lincoln High, no scholarship offers, no connections, no family money, just a pair of hands that understood machines the way some people understand language. Without thinking, without translating, just knowing. He worked part-time at a car wash on Gratiot Avenue, minimum wage, 6 days a week. While the other guys smoked on break, Avery studied the undercarriages of every vehicle that rolled through, the suspension geometry of a BMW, the exhaust routing on a Ford pickup, the way a Corvette's independent rear end differed from a Mustang's solid axle. He kept notes in his head the way his father kept notes in his hands. Every paycheck folded into the envelope. Every dollar a down payment on something nobody else could see. Richard Holloway ran the biggest development firm in Detroit. Holloway Development Corp. had swallowed 37 properties in the Eastwood Corridor over 2 years. Every abandoned house, every vacant lot, every boarded-up storefront, bought for nothing, cleared for luxury condos. Rooftop bars, juice shops, the kind of neighborhood where people like Avery wouldn't be allowed to park. The garage on Breckenridge was the last parcel. Old Man Crawford's place. Abandoned 15 years, roof half-caved, rats in the walls. Worthless on paper. Holloway only kept it because demolishing it cost more than ignoring it. And now, some 18-year-old kid with grease-stained fingers and $1,000 wanted to buy it. To Holloway, the math was simple. sell the junk for $1,000, wait 2 months for the kid to run out of money, out of hope, out of whatever foolish idea had brought him into that lobby. Then take the land back for free when the boy defaulted. The whole corridor, clean. Every lot accounted for, ready for bulldozers and blueprints and buildings that would erase every trace of what Breckenridge used to be.
He didn't know about Earl Green's toolbox. He didn't know about the notebook. He didn't know that the boy he'd just called a dog could hear the heartbeat in machines that most grown men couldn't even start. And he definitely didn't know what was buried under 15 years of dust inside that garage. Nobody did. Not yet. Avery stood in front of the garage on Breckenridge Street at 6 a.m, deed in his back pocket, and wondered if Holloway had been right.
The building looked like something the city had forgotten to demolish. Corrugated steel walls streaked with rust. A roll-up door hanging off one track. Weeds pushing through cracks in the concrete pad out front. The roof sagged in the middle like a tired spine. A faded sign above the door read, "Crawford's Auto," half the letters missing. He pulled the padlock. It crumbled in his hand. Orange dust. The door screamed when he shoved it open. The sound echoed down the empty street. Nobody came to look. Nobody on Breckenridge came to look at anything anymore. Half the houses were boarded. The other half were waiting to be. Inside, the air was thick. Dust and oil and something animal. 15 years of nothing. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling like curtains. A workbench ran along the far wall. Tools still scattered on it, frozen in place, as if Old Man Crawford had stepped out for lunch and never come back. Avery walked in slow. His shoes crunched on broken glass. He ran his hand along the workbench. His fingers left trails in the dust. Wrenches, socket sets, a torque wrench still in its case, a hydraulic jack with a cracked handle. Then he saw it. In the back corner, behind a stack of rotting tires, shapes under canvas tarps. 3 of them. Large. Still. He grabbed the first tarp and pulled. Dust exploded into the air. He coughed, waved it away, and looked. A 1967 Ford Mustang Fastback. Highland green. Or it had been once. Now the paint was clouded, the chrome pitted, the tires flat and cracked. The windshield had a spiderweb fracture across the passenger side. Rust bloomed along the rocker panels like bruises. But the body was straight, the frame was solid, and when Avery popped the hood, the 289 V8 was still there, complete, every bolt in place. His hands started shaking, not from fear, from recognition. He pulled the second tarp, a 1970 Chevelle SS396, tuxedo black, buried under grime, bench seat torn, dashboard cracked, but the big block engine sat untouched, like a sleeping animal. The third tarp, a 1969 Camaro Z28, hugger orange under layers of filth, the rally stripes barely visible. Mice had eaten through the wiring harness. The interior smelled like decay. 3 cars, 3 legends, abandoned for 15 years in a building everyone called junk. Avery sat down on an overturned bucket. His knees were shaking, not from cold, from the weight of what he was looking at. 3 machines that most collectors would kill to find, sitting in the back of a garage that a billionaire had sold him as a joke. The irony wasn't lost on him. Holloway had been so busy laughing at the boy that he never bothered to check what was in the building. He didn't move for a long time. He pulled out his phone and searched. A restored '67 Mustang Fastback in good condition,
between $150,000 and $220,000. A clean Chevelle SS, north of $100,000. The Z28, depending on matching numbers, could push past 180. He was sitting on $500,000 in dead machines that nobody knew existed.
He called Darnell Washington, his best friend since 7th grade, the kid who filmed everything: lunch fights, stray cats, sunset over the freeway. Darnell answered on the second ring. "D, get over here. Bring your camera." "It's 6 in the morning, Ave." "Bring your camera." Darnell showed up 20 minutes later on a bicycle with a phone mounted on a selfie stick. He walked into the garage, saw the 3 cars, and didn't speak for 10 seconds. "Bro, yeah, these real?"
They're real. Darnell circled the Mustang, touched the hood, looked at Avery. "What are you going to do?" Avery picked up a wrench from Crawford's workbench. It fit his hand like it had been waiting. "I'm going to wake them up." That night, Avery didn't sleep. He sat on the garage floor with Crawford's notebook, a leather-bound journal he'd found in the workbench drawer, handwritten, page after page of restoration notes, engine specs, torque settings, vendor contacts, part numbers for components that hadn't been manufactured in 40 years. The old man had been meticulous. Every entry dated, every procedure diagrammed. It was a manual for resurrection. Avery opened his own notebook beside it, the marbled one, with the engine sketches. Side by side, the 2 books looked like they were written by the same hand, just 50 years apart. He started with the Mustang, his father's dream car, the one Earl used to talk about on summer nights, sitting on the porch, describing the sound of the 289 at full throttle like he was describing music. "When that engine opens up," Earl would say, "it doesn't roar, it sings." Avery pulled the valve covers off by flashlight, checked the cylinders one by one. Compression would need testing, but the block wasn't cracked. The heads looked clean. The cam lobes showed wear but no damage. He pressed his ear against the engine block, cold steel against his cheek. He listened. And somewhere, underneath 15 years of silence, he could swear he heard it breathing. The first week nearly broke him. Avery worked 18-hour days. Car wash shift from 6 to 2. Garage from 3 to midnight. Sometimes later. He ate gas station sandwiches and drank water from the garden hose outside Crawford's place. He slept on a folding cot he'd dragged in from the duplex. 2 hours here, 3 hours there, whenever his body quit on him. The Mustang came first, his father's dream car, the car that would prove everything, or prove nothing. He quit the car wash, told his manager on a Monday morning. The manager laughed. "You're leaving a paycheck to go play in a junkyard?" Avery didn't explain. There was nothing to explain to someone who'd never had a dream worth being broke for. He started the way Earl taught him. Not with the pretty parts, with the bones. He pulled the engine. All 289 cubic inches of cast iron, lifted out with a chain hoist he'd rebuilt from Crawford's ceiling rig. It took him 4 hours alone. His arms shook for the rest of the night. He laid the block on the workbench, disassembled it piece by piece, pistons, rings, bearings, connecting rods. Each part cleaned with kerosene and a toothbrush. Each part inspected under a clamp light. The cylinders needed honing. The rings were shot. 2 bearings showed scoring. But the crankshaft was good. The camshaft was good. The heads, once decaked, showed no cracks. Avery didn't have money for new parts. A single set of OEM piston rings would cost $300. A rebuilt water pump, another $150. gaskets, seals, bearings. The list ran past $1,000 before he even got to the transmission. Money he didn't have. Money he couldn't borrow. Money nobody would lend to an 18-year-old with no credit and no collateral except a building full of rust. So he did what his father used to do. He hunted Saturday mornings at the junkyard on 8 Mile, before sunrise, before the professional scavengers showed up with their trucks and their trailers. Avery walked the rows alone, picking through acres of dead cars in the rain, mud up to his ankles, rust flakes on his skin, the smell of old oil and wet metal and decay. He found a matching set of piston rings in a wrecked 65 Falcon. Same bore size, same compression height. A water pump from a rusted-out Fairlane with a seized engine, but a pump that spun free. Gaskets he cut by hand from sheet material, tracing patterns from Crawford's notebook with a razor blade and a steady hand. He spent an entire Saturday cutting a single head gasket. 7 hours for one piece of cork and steel. The old man's journal became his Bible. Every page a lesson. Crawford had written in small, precise handwriting, the kind that belongs to people who measure twice and cut never. Torque specs, timing sequences, notes in the margins like, "Listen for the knock at 2,200 revolutions per minute. It's the number 4 exhaust valve, always." Avery read those notes the way some people read scripture, with belief. Week 2. The engine went back together. Avery set the timing by ear, no gun, no computer. He turned the crank by hand and listened to the valves open and close, adjusting, feeling, the way Earl showed him with a Buick on a Saturday afternoon a lifetime ago. He poured oil, connected the fuel line, wired a battery he'd pulled from the car wash's dead delivery van. He turned the key. The starter ground, coughed, ground again. A puff of white smoke from the exhaust. Then, nothing. Avery sat on the floor, back against the wall, stared at the engine. The garage was silent except for the ticking of hot metal cooling. 15 minutes passed, then 20. He thought about Holloway's voice in the lobby. Dogs don't own houses. He thought about the crumpled 20s scattered across the marble desk. He thought about his mother's $20 bill, the one she couldn't afford to give. He stood up, wiped his face with his forearm, checked the fuel line, found a kink, straightened it, checked the distributor cap, found a hairline crack, replaced it with Crawford's spare from the drawer, still in the box, still wrapped in wax paper, 50 years old. Turned the key again. The 289 coughed once, twice. Then it caught. The sound filled the garage like a voice coming back from the dead. Low at first, rough, then smoothing out, finding its rhythm, settling into an idol that Avery could feel in his chest. He didn't cheer. He didn't yell. He pressed his palms flat on the hood and closed his eyes. It didn't roar. It sang. Darnell was already filming. He'd been filming since the second attempt. The camera caught everything. The white smoke, the silence, the catch. Avery's face when the engine held. "What do we call this one?" Darnell asked from behind the phone. Avery opened his eyes. "Earl." That video. 18-year-old brings a dead 67 Mustang back to life in a junk garage. Went up on Darnell's channel at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night. By Wednesday morning, it had 40,000 views. By Thursday, 200,000. By Sunday, 2.3 million. The comments came like a flood. "This kid is unreal. Those hands are blessed. Someone get this guy a shop. He named the car after his dad. I'm not crying, you're crying. The way he listened to the engine. Old school, real school. Avery didn't read them. He was already under the Chevelle, draining 40-year-old transmission fluid into a bucket. But the world was reading them, and the world was starting to pay attention.
Nah, are you serious right now? Imagine someone calls you a dog to your face, in front of everyone, and not a single person speaks up. Now imagine you take that pain, walk into a junk garage, and make a dead engine sing. That's not revenge. That's proof.
The phone calls started on Monday. First, a blogger from a classic car forum in California. Then a reporter from the Detroit Free Press. Then a producer from a cable show about barn finds. Darnell's inbox filled so fast he stopped counting. Avery ignored all of them. He was underneath the Mustang, welding a patch onto the floor pan when Darnell walked in waving his phone. "Ave, someone named Harrison Burke wants to fly here, from Texas, tomorrow." "Who?" "He collects cars. Like, a lot of cars. He's got a warehouse in Dallas with 60 vehicles, all classic." "Tell him I'm busy." "He said he'll pay cash for the Mustang, sight unseen." Avery slid out from under the car, grease across his forehead. "It's not for sale." Harrison Burke showed up anyway. A big man in a linen shirt and ostrich skin boots, stepping out of a rented Escalade on Breckenridge Street like he'd just landed on the moon. He looked at the boarded houses, the cracked sidewalks, the weeds growing through chain-link fences. Then he looked at the garage. "This is it? This is it." Burke walked inside, saw the Mustang, now stripped to bare metal on one side, fresh primer on the other, engine gleaming under the clamp light. He crouched down and looked at the welds on the floor pan, ran his finger along the seam. "Who taught you this?" "My father." "Where'd he learn?" "Same way I did, listening." Burke stood up, dusted off his knees. "I'll give you $185 for this car, right now. Cash." Avery shook his head. "Not selling, but I'll restore one of yours. 40,000. You supply the car, I supply the hands." Burke stared at him for a long time. Then he smiled the way people smile when they recognize something they haven't seen in a while. Deal. That was the first contract. Burke shipped a 1965 Corvette Stingray to Breckenridge 3 days later, on a flatbed that barely fit down the street. The neighbors came out to watch. Kids on bicycles, old women on porches. A tow truck driver who took a photo and posted it with the caption, "Something's happening on Breckenridge." Something was. The Corvette was a disaster. The frame had hidden rust that didn't show until Avery pulled the body panels. The differential was frozen solid. The wiring harness had been chewed through by something that lived in the trunk for a decade. Burke's mechanic in Texas had declared it a lost cause. That's why Burke shipped it to Detroit. He wanted to see if the kid in the video was real or just lucky. Avery worked on it 7 days a week. He fabricated a patch panel for the floor from sheet steel, cutting and bending it by hand because he couldn't afford a press brake. He soaked the differential in penetrating oil for 3 days, heating it with a propane torch every 4 hours, until it finally broke free at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday. He rewired the entire car from the firewall back, using Crawford's color-coded diagrams from a 1963 Corvette entry that matched the harness layout almost exactly. Avery finished the Corvette in 5 weeks, every gasket hand-cut, every chrome piece polished by hand. The paint, Nassau blue, he mixed himself, matching the original formula from a chip he'd found under the dashboard. When Burke saw the finished car on a video call, he went quiet for 8 seconds. Then he said one word. Perfect. He wired the 40,000 that afternoon. Then he did something that no amount of advertising could buy. He told 3 friends. Not casually. He called each one personally and said the same thing. There's a kid in Detroit you need to know about. Trust me. In the world of classic car collecting, a recommendation from Harrison Burke was worth more than a full-page ad in any magazine. His word was currency, and he just spent it all on Avery Green. By month 3, Avery had a waiting list. 4 clients, then 7. A retired surgeon from Chicago who shipped a 1971 Plymouth Barracuda. A tech founder from San Francisco with a 1968 Jaguar E-Type. A country singer from Nashville who'd inherited a 1957 Chevy Bel Air and wanted it restored for her father's 80th birthday. Avery hired 2 kids from the neighborhood. Jamal Torres, 17, who'd been heading nowhere fast until Avery put a wrench in his hand and told him to listen. Keisha Bryant, 19, who could sand a fender smoother than anyone Avery had ever seen, including his father. He paid them $15 an hour, more than any of them had ever made. He taught them the way Earl taught him, not by explaining, but by doing. Stand here. Hold this. Watch the metal. Feel the torque. Listen. Jamal burned through 3 grinding discs the first day. Keisha accidentally sanded through a primer coat and had to start over. Neither of them quit. Neither of them wanted to. Lorraine came to the garage on a Sunday afternoon. She hadn't been since Avery bought the place. She'd been afraid to see what $1,000 and a dream looked like in the daylight. She walked through the roll-up door and stopped. The garage was transformed. Clean concrete floor, painted gray, tool boards on every wall, organized, labeled. The Chevelle and the Camaro sat side by side, half restored, gleaming under new fluorescent lights Avery had wired himself. A radio played Motown from the workbench. Jamal was under a lift. Keisha was taping off a quarter panel. The whole place smelled like fresh paint and possibility. On the wall, above the workbench, a framed photograph. Earl Green, 32 years old, leaning against a Buick with a wrench in his hand and a grin on his face. Below it, in Avery's handwriting, every machine has a heartbeat. You just have to listen. Lorraine pressed her hand over her mouth. She didn't make a sound. Avery walked over. Oil on his shirt, grease on his hands. He hugged his mother, and for the first time since he was 12, he let himself cry. Not because of the pain, because his father would have loved this room. The Detroit Free Press ran the story on the front page of the Sunday edition. From junk garage to classic car haven, the Avery Green story. The article mentioned the video, now at 9 million views. It mentioned Burke's endorsement. It mentioned the waiting list, the neighborhood kids learning a trade, the framed photo of Earl. It also mentioned the price. An independent appraiser, contacted by the reporter, estimated the value of Green's garage, the business, the inventory, the brand, the contracts, at $1.8 million. Month 3. $1.8 million. From a place a CEO called a rat hole. Darnell's latest video title? The $1,000 Garage, Month 3 Update. You won't believe this. 14 million views. And counting. The internet had a new favorite underdog. And Richard Holloway, somewhere on the 42nd floor, was about to find out. Richard Holloway saw the article on a Sunday morning. Patricia left it on his desk with his espresso. No note. She didn't need one. He read it twice. Then he picked up the phone. Get me legal. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday, hand-delivered by a man in a gray suit who didn't smile. Zoning violation. The garage on Breckenridge was classified as residential storage, not commercial automotive. Operating a business without a reclassification permit was a misdemeanor. Cease all operations within 14 days or face criminal charges. Avery read the letter 3 times. His hands didn't shake, but his stomach did. The second letter came Thursday. Noise complaint, filed by a property owner 2 blocks north. A property owned, Avery later discovered, by Holloway Development Corp. The complaint alleged excessive noise during restricted hours. A fine of $500 per documented incident. The third letter came the following Monday. Environmental violation. Improper storage and disposal of automotive fluids. An inspector would arrive within 48 hours. The inspector came. A man named Pruitt with a clipboard and a camera. He photographed everything. The oil drums, the solvent cans, the paint booth Avery had built from plywood and plastic sheeting. He found 3 minor violations. Real ones. Avery had been too busy building a business to study environmental codes. "You've got 30 days to comply," Pruitt said. He didn't look at Avery when he said it. "After that, we shut you down." The inspections didn't stop. Building inspector the next week, structural concerns about the roof. He spent 6 hours measuring joist spans and taking photographs of the ceiling, while Avery stood in the corner watching his workday evaporate. Fire marshal the week after that. Inadequate extinguisher placement. No posted exit plan. Insufficient ventilation in the paint area. A $4,000 remediation estimate that might as well have been $4 million. Every visit cost time. Every visit cost money Avery didn't have. Every visit came with a clipboard and a camera and a man who wouldn't look him in the eye. And every visit meant a car sitting unfinished on the lift while Avery dealt with paperwork instead of metal. Darnell tracked the pattern. He pulled public records. Every complaint traced back to properties owned by Holloway Development Corp. Or shell companies linked to it. Every inspector visit followed a phone call from the same law firm, Garrett and Pierce, Holloway's retained counsel. "They're trying to bury you," Darnell said, sitting on the hood of the half-finished Camaro. "Legally. Slowly. So it looks like you failed on your own." Avery knew. He'd known since the first letter. But knowing didn't make it easier. The worst night came in week 4 of the siege. 2 a.m., Avery, alone in the garage. Jamal and Keisha had gone home. The Barracuda sat on the lift with its transmission pulled. 3 compliance deadlines in the next 10 days. Legal fees he couldn't afford. A client from Chicago calling every day asking about delays. He sat on the floor next to Earl's photo. The fluorescent lights buzzed above him. "I don't know how to fight this, Dad." The photo didn't answer. Photos never do. He thought about calling Holloway, asking for terms, selling back the garage and walking away with whatever dignity he had left. $1,000 in, 1,000 lessons learned. Maybe Holloway was right. Maybe people from where Avery came from didn't get to build things. Maybe the world had a ceiling, and he'd just hit it. He picked up his phone, scrolled to Holloway Development Corp's number. His thumb hovered over the green button. Then he looked at Earl's photo. His father's face, that grin, that wrench. And he remembered something Earl said once, not about engines, about life. "The machine doesn't care who you are, son. It only cares if you're good enough. And you are." He put the phone down. Then it rang. A different call. Unknown number. 2:15 in the morning. "Avery Green?" "Yeah, my name is Claudia Whitfield. I'm an attorney. I saw your story on the news." "I can't afford a lawyer, ma'am." "I know. That's why I'm calling for free." Avery sat up straight. His back ached. His eyes burned. but something shifted in his chest, a gear catching, a cylinder firing, the smallest spark of something he'd almost lost. Hope. "What do you need from me?" he asked. "Everything. Every letter, every inspection report, every name. And don't throw anything away. People like Holloway always leave a trail. They just assume nobody's looking." Claudia Whitfield was not a small-time lawyer. She was a civil rights attorney who had argued cases before the Michigan Supreme Court. She'd spent 30 years fighting predatory developers, discriminatory zoning, and corporate land grabs in Detroit's black neighborhoods. She was 61 years old, 5'3", and had never lost a case she believed in. She believed in this one. Within a week, Whitfield filed a countersuit. Targeted harassment through selective code enforcement, discriminatory business practices, abuse of municipal process for private commercial gain. She subpoenaed Holloway's phone records. She subpoenaed the inspection requests. She subpoenaed the shell company registrations. Every single complaint traced back to one desk on the 42nd floor. Whitfield held a press conference on the steps of the Wayne County Courthouse. She laid out the evidence in 12 minutes flat. No emotion, no drama, just facts, dates, and names. She ended with one sentence. Richard Holloway didn't try to shut down a garage. He tried to shut down a young black man's future. And the law has something to say about that. The local news picked it up first, then national. CNN ran a segment, "Detroit Teen's Garage Dream Under Attack by Developer." The clip of Avery standing in front of his garage, arms folded, grease on his shirt, the Mustang gleaming behind him, became the thumbnail of the week. The community responded. Not with words, with bodies. 40 neighbors showed up at the next city council meeting. Lorraine spoke for 3 minutes. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She said, "My son bought a building that nobody wanted, in a neighborhood that nobody cared about, and turned it into something that matters. And now a man in a suit is trying to take it because he's embarrassed that an 18-year-old black kid did what he couldn't, made this block worth something." The council voted unanimously to reclassify the garage as a commercial automotive property. The noise complaints were dismissed. The environmental violations were downgraded to warnings with a compliance extension. Holloway's legal assault collapsed in 9 days. Forbes called the next morning. They wanted a feature. The Forbes journalist arrived on a Wednesday. Her name was Nadia Cole. She brought a photographer, a fact-checker, and a skepticism she'd earned from 12 years of writing about people who turned out to be less than advertised. Avery Green was not less than advertised. She spent 3 days in the garage. She watched him rebuild a carburetor without looking at the manual. She watched him tune a 396 big block by ear while Jamal timed it with a strobe, and the readings matched within half a degree. She watched Keisha sand a quarter panel for 2 hours, checking it with her palm every 10 minutes, rejecting imperfections that Nadia couldn't see with a magnifying glass. She interviewed Harrison Burke by phone. "I've been collecting cars for 22 years, Burke said. "I've worked with shops in California, Alabama, Connecticut. The best work I've ever seen came out of a junk garage in Detroit, from a kid who wasn't old enough to buy a beer." She interviewed the surgeon from Chicago. "I've restored cars with 3 different shops over the years," he said. "None of them called me to discuss the history of the vehicle before starting work. Avery did. He wanted to know why the car mattered to me. That's not a mechanic. That's an artist who happens to use wrenches." She interviewed the tech founder who flew to Detroit specifically for the interview. He brought his E-Type, now finished. British racing green, wire wheels gleaming, the straight 6 engine purring like a cat in a sunbeam. I paid $42,000 for this restoration, he said. The shop in Palo Alto quoted me $90,000, and their work wouldn't have been half as good. She interviewed the country singer, who cried on camera when she talked about the Bel Air. My daddy sat in that car on his 80th birthday and he couldn't speak. He just held the steering wheel and cried. Avery gave me that moment. You can't put a price on that. Every one of them said the same thing in different words. This kid doesn't restore cars. He resurrects them. She pulled the numbers. In 6 months, Green's Garage had completed 11 restorations. Average contract value? $38,000. Total revenue? $418,000. The 3 original cars, the Mustang, the Chevelle, the Camaro, were now fully restored, collectively appraised at $470,000. The business had a waiting list through the following year. 14 clients. Deposits paid, Nadia hired an independent appraiser, Kirkland & Associates, one of the top business valuation firms in the Midwest. They assessed everything: the brand equity, the social media reach, the client contracts, the inventory, the real estate value of the lot on Breckenridge, which had tripled since Avery bought it. The number came back on a Friday afternoon: $4.2 million. The appraiser noted in his report that the figure was conservative. The brand value alone, driven by over 40 million cumulative video views and a story that had been covered by CNN, Forbes, the Detroit Free Press, and over 200 independent media outlets, was difficult to quantify. This is not just a garage, the report read. It is a cultural asset.
Nadia read the number to Avery over the phone. He was under the Camaro when she called. He slid out, sat on the creeper, and didn't say anything for a long time. "You okay?" she asked. "I paid $1,000 for this place." "I know. He called me a dog." "I know that too."
The article published on a Monday morning. The $1,000 garage that became a $4.2 million empire. Meet Avery Green. It was the most read story on Forbes.com for 3 consecutive days. The photo on the cover? Avery leaning against the Mustang, arms crossed, the garage door open behind him, sunlight cutting across the concrete floor, became one of the most shared images on the internet that week. Richard Holloway read the article in his office, alone. The espresso went cold on his desk. $4.2 million. The lot he'd sold for $1,000. The building he'd called a rat hole. The kid he'd called a stray. He picked up the phone. Not to call his lawyers this time. He called Avery directly. The number was in the article. "I'd like to meet." "I know where your office is." "No, I'll come to you." Holloway drove to Breckenridge Street on a Thursday afternoon. No Escalade. No driver. A silver Mercedes sedan that he parked on the cracked asphalt in front of the garage. He sat in the car for 2 minutes before getting out. Avery was waiting. Standing in the open doorway, grease on his hands. The Mustang behind him, gleaming. Earl's photo on the wall. Holloway walked up. He looked different than the man in the lobby 6 months ago. Smaller, somehow. The suit was the same price. The posture was not. "I'll give you $6 million for everything. The garage, the lot, the business, the name. $6 million, right now." Avery didn't blink. "No." "7." "No." Holloway's jaw worked. "Name your price." "There's no price. This isn't for sale." "Everything's for sale, kid. That's how the world works." "Not my world." They stood 3 feet apart. The smell of fresh paint and engine oil between them. Holloway looked past Avery into the garage, at the cars, the toolboards, the kids working, the photo of Earl Green, the quote on the wall.
He looked at it the way a man looks at something he destroyed, and then watched someone else build from the rubble.
"You know what you cost me?" Holloway said.
Quiet now. No smirk. This block was the last piece, the whole corridor, 2 years of acquisition. You, sitting here, on this lot, killed a $200 million development. I didn't kill anything, Avery said. I built something. There's a difference. Holloway opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out.
Speechless. For the first time that anyone at Holloway Development Corp could remember. Completely, utterly speechless. He turned around, walked to his car, sat behind the wheel for a full minute before starting the engine. Then he drove away, slowly, like a man who'd just been told something he'd spend the rest of his life trying to understand. Avery watched the Mercedes disappear down Breckenridge. The taillights turned left at the end of the block and vanished. The street was quiet. A dog barked somewhere. A screen door slapped shut 2 houses down. Avery looked down at his hands, grease in the lines of his palms, calluses on every finger, the hands of a mechanic, the hands of his father. Then he turned around, picked up a wrench, and went back to work. 2 weeks later, standing in front of a crowd of 200 people, neighbors, clients, reporters, city council members, Claudia Whitfield in the front row, Avery cut the ribbon on Green's Garage Academy, a free vocational training center for young people who couldn't afford trade school, automotive restoration, mechanical engineering fundamentals, small business management. 12 slots in the first class, 437 applications. Lorraine held one end of the ribbon. Darnell filmed from the roof of the Escalade that Burke had flown in for the occasion. Jamal and Keisha stood behind Avery in matching shop shirts, forest green embroidered with the Green's Garage logo. On the wall behind them, above the bay doors, a new sign. Professional. Permanent. Lit from below. Green's Garage Academy. Established by Avery Green. Every machine has a heartbeat. You just have to listen. Avery held the scissors. He looked at his mother. She nodded. He cut the ribbon. The crowd erupted, and somewhere on the 42nd floor of a glass tower downtown, a man sat alone in a very expensive chair and heard nothing at all. 1 year later, Breckenridge Street looked like a different planet. Not because someone tore it down and built something shiny on top, because someone refused to leave and built something real from the inside. The houses were still there, same porches, same chain-link fences, but the boarded windows were gone. 12 homes had been repaired, roofs patched, siding replaced, porches rebuilt, by academy students learning construction alongside automotive restoration. A community garden grew in the vacant lot next to the garage, planted by Keisha and a group of neighborhood kids who had nothing to do last summer and now had too much. Holloway Development Corp. Quietly withdrew from the Eastwood corridor. No press release, no announcement. They simply stopped acquiring properties. The $200 million luxury development died in a conference room, killed by a city council that wouldn't approve the permits and a public that wouldn't stop sharing Avery Green's story. The garage was busier than ever. 22 restorations completed in the first year. 3 more employees hired, all from the neighborhood. Revenue north of $800,000. A second bay added, built by hand over a weekend by Avery, Jamal, and 4 academy students. The Mustang still sat in the center of the shop. The first car, the one named Earl. Avery had offers, $300,000, $350,000, once an anonymous bid of $400,000 through a broker in New York. He turned them all down. "That car doesn't have a price," he told Nadia Cole during a follow-up interview. "It has a name." People asked him why.
Why keep a car worth nearly $500,000 when the money could fund the academy for years? Avery's answer was always the same. That car is the first thing I built with my father's hands. The first thing I finished that he started dreaming about 30 years ago. If you can put a price on that, you don't understand what any of this is about. Nobody asked again. The academy graduated its first class of 12 in the spring. 9 of them found jobs within 60 days at dealerships, body shops, and independent garages across Michigan, Ohio, and Illinois. 2 started their own mobile repair services. 1, a 17-year-old named Curtis Wells, who had been expelled from 2 schools and arrested once for stealing a car stereo, was offered a full scholarship to a technical college in Grand Rapids. Curtis's mother came to the graduation. She found Avery afterward, in the back of the garage, wiping down a torque wrench. "My son was going to prison," she said. "You know that." "I know." "What did you say to him? What did you do?" Avery hung the wrench on the board, straightened it. "I gave him a wrench and told him to listen." She hugged him. He let her. And when she pulled back, she looked at the garage, the lights, the cars, the kids working, and said, "This place saved my son's life." Avery didn't say anything. He just nodded, because he knew. He'd been that kid once, standing on a milk crate, reaching for something bigger than himself, with a father who believed he could touch it. Avery turned 19 on a Saturday in October. Lorraine made a cake. Darnell brought a card signed by 400 people, followers from the channel who'd mailed messages from 31 states. Burke sent a case of root beer with a note, "Still the best hands in the business." That evening, Avery walked through the garage alone. Lights off. Moonlight through the bay windows. He stopped at the workbench where Crawford's notebook still sat, open to the same page it had been on the first night. A diagram of a 289 valve train, annotated in handwriting that looked like his own. He opened the drawer underneath, pulled out a photograph he'd found weeks ago, tucked behind the notebook. A young man, maybe 25, standing in front of this same garage, this same door, holding a wrench and grinning. On the back, in faded pencil, Arthur Crawford, 1971. First day. Avery set the photo next to Earl's. 2 men who never met. 2 mechanics separated by 50 years. Both standing in the same spot, holding the same kind of wrench, wearing the same kind of grin. He ran his hand along the workbench. The wood was warm from the day's sun. "Thank you," he said, to both of them, to neither of them, to the garage itself, maybe. Then he heard it. Not an engine, not a machine, something quieter. The sound a building makes when it's full of purpose, when the walls have absorbed enough sweat and noise and laughter and music to develop their own kind of pulse. A heartbeat. He smiled, turned off the last light, locked the door. Tomorrow there'd be another car to wake up, another kid to teach, another person out there who looked at something broken and saw something worth saving. But tonight, he just listened. Now here's a question for you. When Richard Holloway looked at that garage, he saw junk. When he looked at Avery, he saw nothing. A stray, a dog, someone who'd crawl back in 2 months. What do you see? Because there's a kid on your block, in your city, in your school, right now, with grease on their hands and a dream that nobody takes seriously. And they're one chance away from becoming Avery Green.
or one door slammed shut away from becoming just another statistic that people shake their heads about. So share this story. Not for the algorithm, for that kid. Because maybe, just maybe, they need to hear that a junk garage and $1,000 and a pair of steady hands can change everything. Hit subscribe, turn on the bell, and drop a comment. What's the one dream you'd spend your last $1,000 on? Because somewhere out there, a machine is waiting, and it has a heartbeat. You just have to listen. Man, I can't even. Imagine being 18, grease on your hands, and a billionaire calls you worthless.